Instruction skill 11 is about understanding ratios. Let's look at the story first on this one. Amy Lee made a table of her family's expenses. What is the ratio of the amount spent on February utilities to the amount spent on January utilities? The answer 2 to 3 is recorded on the grid. And in the table, you see that she has broken down all of her expenses for 2 months. Title of the graph or the table is Lee Family Take-Home Pay Allocation. Solution. A ratio is a comparison of two numbers, most often written as a fraction. Before I continue, let's look over here at this box to the left. A ratio can be written 3 different ways. In words, 2 to 3, with a colon, 2 to 3, or as a fraction, 2 to 3. When writing a ratio, you reduce a fraction to lowest terms. For example, write 6 to 8 as 6 over 8 and reduce to 3/4. A ratio greater than 1 is written as an improper fraction, not as a mixed number. For example, write 10 to 4 as 10 over 4, which simplifies to 5 over 2, but you would not bring that on down to 2.5. A ratio always has a top and a bottom. A whole number ratio is written with a denominator of 1. For example, write 6 to 2 as 6 over 2 and simplify down to 3 over 1. A ratio must always have a top and bottom. So here's the solution to our question. In the question, you are asked to use a ratio to compare February and January utility expenses. Find the utility expenses for January and February. Write the ratio as a fraction. The order of the numbers is very important. The numerator is the first number in the question. For example, in this case, it's the February utility expense. The denominator is the number following the word to in the question, January utility expense. The ratio of February utilities to January utilities is 140 over 210. And you reduce the fraction to lowest terms by dividing top and bottom by 70 to get 2 to 3. So the ratio of February utilities to January utilities is 2 to 3. You could also write that as 2 to 3 or 2 to 3. But since we need to grid our answer, you would want it in fraction form. And let's just take a look up here at this alternate answer grid. They have put in the 2/3 and they have gridded 2/3. Remember, you must bubble in the answers for the computer to read them. So let's practice with ratios. This is a very, very valuable math skill. The concept question. Of the 15 adults who joined the Army Reserves yesterday, 11 are men. What is the ratio of women to men? Mark in your answer in the circles in the grid. So the important thing, or one of the important things, we want to grid the number of women compared to the number of men. And that order is very important. Women to men. And they told us that 11 of the new reservists are men. So we know this answer. But we need to find the number of women. Now it tells us a total that there were 15 adults who joined yesterday. Of those 15 adults, 11 of them were men, which would mean that the rest are women. So 15 take away 11 leaves us with 4 women. And that would be this missing number here. But in order to do this as a fraction, you need to put the numerator first over the denominator. So this would be 4 fraction bar 11. And remember, I must bubble in those answers to get the computer to understand what I want it to say. It cannot just read what you write in. You have to bubble in what you want it to understand. 4/11. Women to men. So the women are listed first in this question. Here is a procedural question. Problems 2 and 3 refer to the table on page 34. So I'm just going to jump back over here and take a quick picture of this. You are able to turn back to the page previously. I cannot do that quite as simply, so let me just take a picture of it and then we'll have it saved so that we can work with it on the next page. So here, I will paste it right here for the moment. What is the ratio of the amount spent on clothing in January to the amount spent on clothing in February? So here is the all-important word, to. In front of to, we have clothing in January. And behind the word to, we have clothing in February. So the numbers we want to look for are clothing numbers. That would be these. And then I have to be very careful that I put January first because that's what the question asked me for. January to February. January's clothing amount was $60. February was $180. It could have been written this way, but these answers are in fraction form. So let's write our number as a fraction. Let's cancel a set of zeros, and let's simplify by, 2. 2 into 6, and then 2 into 10. 2 into 6 is 3, 2 into 10 is 5, and that is as low as we can go, and something is wrong. What have I done wrong? Oh, do you see what I've done wrong? I'm not going to make this video again. I make mistakes quite often, especially at this hour of the evening. So I'm going to erase what I did wrong, which is right there. Oh, this is so common for me. You see the problem. 180, 100. I just wrote it wrong. What I want you to realize is if you're not getting the answer that is listed, you've done something wrong, and it happens to us all, so don't feel bad. How about 60 over 180 instead of 100. Cancel a set of zeros, and this time you can reduce by 6. 6 into 6 is 1, and 6 into 18 is 3, and I like that answer. Be very careful though. Is it number 1 or number 4? It is number 1. You have to get the 1 and the 3 in the proper order. Sorry about that. For January, what is the ratio of the amount spent on utilities to the amount spent on child care? So we're looking just at January, and we want the amount spent on utilities to child care for January only. So this time I'm just in the second column, the January column. And here is the number for utilities. Here is the number for child care. And we need to make sure that we have our ratio in the right order. Utility to child care. So the utility number comes first. It's 210. To child care is 180. And again, we could use the colon to write this. Sometimes it will show that. But our answers are in fraction form. So let's do them in fraction notation. You can cancel the zeros and then reduce by 3. 3 into 21 goes 7 times, and 3 into 18 goes 6 times. You leave it as an improper fraction. 7/6 is your answer. So they spent slightly more on utilities than on child care. But that 7 and 6 are close together, so it was not a large difference at all. All right, the application questions, number 4. And we are allowed to use a calculator on this one. And this time I remembered to get my Casio out, so hopefully if I need it, I can make that work. A summary of Isaac's paycheck is shown in the table below. What percent of Isaac's gross earnings go to paying taxes? Round your answer to the nearest percent. Now, this is not asking me for a ratio per se. It doesn't say what is a ratio, it says what is a percent. But if you can get the ratio, then you can get the percent. So what we're looking for is what percent of Isaac's gross earnings go to paying taxes. So I want to know the amount of taxes compared to his gross earnings. And that is a ratio. It's a fraction, but it's still a ratio. So let's set up our fraction. His gross earnings are right here, $2,000. And gross means before taxes. And it says paying taxes. So we have to be very careful here what it's asking. Taxes include all taxes. So that would be federal, state, and Social Security taxes. We would not calculate his medical insurance as a tax. And so I need to first of all add up the 300, the 100, and the 124. Now, I don't need the calculator for that, but if you do, it's okay. You can use the calculator to get 524. So to get that number, I added up the 300 plus the 100 plus the 124. Then once you get it into that fraction form, you need to turn it into a decimal. So 524 divided by 2,000. This is going to give us a decimal. 524 divided by 2,000 is 0.262. And then you can turn that decimal into its percent form by doing 2 scoops to the right. So you get 26.2, and it says to round that to the nearest percent. So we're looking at about 26%. So I like answer number 2 on that one. Number 5, this is a no calculator question. When estimating a bid for remodeling a kitchen, a contractor uses the allocation shown in the graph below. What is the ratio of the cost for materials to the cost for labor? So cost of kitchen remodeling, materials are 25%, and labor is 75%. So for every dollar spent on remodeling, 75 cents goes to labor and 25 cents goes to materials. If you want a ratio, look for the word to. Then look at what comes before the word to and what comes after the word to. And that will help you set up your ratio. So materials to labor. Materials 25%, labor 75%, or 25 to 75, or 25 over 75. And we can simplify that by 25. 1, 2, 3. So I like answer number 1 for that one. And that's all. If you have not done the computation review, I do suggest that you look at those on pages 132, 133, and 138.